Hello and welcome to the Department of State's 2021 commemoration of Juneteenth. The first year New Jersey has recognized Juneteenth as a state and public holiday. I'm Tahesha Way, New Jersey's Secretary of State, and it's my honor to lead a department that works to preserve and expand our understanding of New Jersey's history, including portfolios like the New Jersey Historical Commission and the state's archives. Throughout the year, my colleagues work to make certain that current and future generations have access to, learn, and understand our history and all of the people who lived it. And I'm so pleased to recognize this pivotal moment of American history. When we think of the states known for allowing the enslavement of people, the so-called slave states, the southern states probably come to mind first, but people were enslaved in New Jersey in 1664, and there were still people enslaved in the state until the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in 1865. In my time as Secretary of State, I've had the opportunity to visit and support sites that are doing the work to tell more of this story. We can see the legacy of slavery and the fight for emancipation throughout our state. Notably, in Camden, you can visit historic markers at the 3 sites where enslaved people were sold at auction during the 1700s. In the state archives, I viewed the birth records of children born to enslaved women in the 1800s. You can also visit the new Harriet Tubman Museum in Cape May, where she lived, worked, and helped people find freedom via the Underground Railroad. And on the itinerary for our state's new Black Heritage Trail, you can learn why Burlington County is known as the cradle of emancipation. This is New Jersey's history, and today we have an opportunity to explore it as we recognize Juneteenth now. I am so pleased to be joined today by Noelle Lorraine Williams, who directs the African American History Project at the New Jersey Historical Commission. Welcome, Noelle. Let's just start off with you telling all of us, what is Juneteenth?
Wow. Thank you very much, Secretary Way, for inviting me to be in conversation with you today. Juneteenth marks a holiday that commemorates when enslaved Blacks in Galveston, Texas, learned that they were in fact freed by President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation 2.5 years earlier. The date was June 19, 1865. Now, the thing to understand about Juneteenth is that it's a day of celebration, but it's also a day of mourning and justice. I would like to feature a quote from a Black woman poet, Frances Ellen Watkins, who wrote a piece about the Emancipation Proclamation called The Deliverance. It was actually written in 1872 and explores the complexity of Juneteenth. When they told us Mr. Lincoln said that slavery was dead, we just poured our prayers and blessings upon his precious head. We just laughed and danced and shouted and prayed and sang and cried. In this way, we get to see how Juneteenth is both a day of celebration and a day of commemoration.
Okay, and thank you, Noelle, for providing the understanding of Juneteenth and its complexity. But now let's talk about why something, as you noted, happened in Texas matters here in New Jersey. Why is Juneteenth a significant day in our state's history?
Okay. The Emancipation Proclamation did not free all of the enslaved people in the United States. For example, West Virginia, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Kentucky, Tennessee, and Missouri were all allowed to keep slavery intact. Though it even applied to the enslaved people in Tallahassee, Florida, they were not notified of the Emancipation Proclamation either until May. Though it officially ended in December, when ratified by the government, slavery's final legal death in New Jersey occurred on January 23rd, 1866, when in his first official act as governor, Marcus L. Ward of Newark signed a constitutional amendment that brought about an absolute end to slavery in the state. In other words, the institution of slavery in New Jersey survived for months following the Declaration of Freedom in Texas.
So slavery has been outlawed in New Jersey for 155 years, which might seem like a long time, but slavery existed in New Jersey for at least 200 years before it was abolished. Enslaved people lived in our state for generations. Can you tell us, Noelle, what were their lives like?
Enslaved people in New Jersey did a range of work, including mining and working in quarries, farm work, cooper work, blacksmiths, and cooks, amongst many, many other tasks. For example, the enslaved people of the Coe family in Newark worked in the quarry, and one of them, Jack Cujo, fought as a soldier on behalf of his enslaver in the American Revolutionary War.
So Noelle, in addition to this, do we know anything about the specific enslaved people who were among the last to be free here in New Jersey?
So, though we know that there were at least 16 people enslaved in New Jersey, there may have been many more. One scholar has indicated that it might have been in the hundreds, as in Delaware, where there were close to 1,000 people still enslaved. From the census, we learn about women like Dina Boyce, who was born in Somerset, New Jersey in 1783, who would live almost her entire life enslaved. She died 4 months after the ratification of the 13th Amendment. Or Lockey White, who would live almost her entire life enslaved. Later, she worked as a servant for the same family that had enslaved her for decades. But what is so touching about her story is that her granddaughter was named after her, and her family, they lived close by. So in that way, we can see family ties even during slavery, during that period into emancipation.
Just hearing the history, people would want to know what historical records can we use to learn more about how Black people lived in the years immediately following emancipation?
So the historical records we can use include the census, some of our archives at our historical societies around the state, as well as our libraries, including the New Jersey Room at the Newark Public Library.
So Noelle, we've discussed the historical aspect of Juneteenth and its legacy, but I do want to also recognize, as you noted, that it is a celebration of a core American value, liberty. Juneteenth represents a historic day of independence for enslaved people and their descendants, but more broadly for all Americans. In fact, it's also known as Freedom Day, if I'm correct. Yet, until last year, many people weren't familiar with the history or the holiday. So for those who might be celebrating their first Juneteenth, I thought we could close today by sharing how we are each recognizing it. For me, I'm very excited that I'll be spending Saturday in Perth Amboy, where the first vote in the entire United States from a free Black person was cast by Thomas Mundy in 1866. I look forward also to sharing this significant history with my 4 girls and some good food and fellowship. How about you, Noelle? Can you also tell us a bit about how people are recognizing Juneteenth across the United States and even yourself and your family?
Oh, thank you. I look forward to commemorating this Juneteenth. I'll actually be doing a virtual tour at the New York Museum of Art, and I am so excited to be able to present what I believe to be one of the oldest artifacts of enslaved people in New Jersey, a well that was chiseled from a piece of a limestone here in Newark. And then one of the things that I think is very special about Juneteenth, as we explored earlier, are just the range of ways that people are commemorating it, whether they're barbecues, whether they're discussions and exhibitions, commemorations. I even saw that some people are hosting blood banks for their communities, as well as financial empowerment seminars. And so I have to concur that Juneteenth is a day of freedom and liberty for individuals, for their families, and their communities.
Thank you. I hope this is the first of many annual conversations and events centering around Juneteenth and its pivotal role in our history that our department can play a role in. Noelle, thanks so much for joining me and for all that you and the New Jersey Historical Commission do in this historical space.
Thank you for inviting me to be in conversation with you, Secretary White.
Thank you.